All right, we'll go ahead and get started tonight with a song, and then we'll get into our class time. And so we'll let Michael kick us off and go from there.
If you have a song book, turn it to number 508. Number 508. Songs of faith and praise. Songs of praise.
All right, good.
Oh, wonderful Savior is Jesus, my Lord, a wonderful Savior to me. He hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock, where rivers of flesh dry to see. He hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock, that shadows the bright thirsty land. He hideth my life in the depths of His love, and covers me there with His hand, and covers me there with His hand. Oh, wonderful Savior is Jesus, my Lord. He takes my burden away. He holds me up and I shall not be moved. He gives me strength as my day. He hides my soul in the depths of the rock, that shadows of the bright thirsty land. He hides my life in the depths of His love, and covers me there with His hand, and covers me there with His hand. With numberless blessings each moment He crowns, and filled with His fullness divine. I sing in my rapture, the Lord is God, for such a Redeemer as mine. And He hides my soul in the cleft of the rock, that shadows the bright thirsty land. And He hides my life in the depths of His love, and covers me there with His hand, and covers me there with His hand. When clothed in His brightness and Lord, I rise to meet Him in clouds of the sky. His perfect salvation, His wonderful love, I'll shout with the millions on high. And He hides my soul in the cleft of the rock, that shadows the bright thirsty land. And He hides my life in the depths of His love, and covers me there with His hand, and covers me there with His hand.
All right, again, good evening. We're going to be in John chapters 9 through 12 tonight. If you want to go ahead and turn over to that section, we're going to dig in together in just a minute. Much like we did last week, we are going to fill up our class time tonight because we have a lot to go through. There is a lot of content here. The first 12 chapters really are really the first, kind of first half of John, if you will, even though it's not quite half, it's a little over half. But the first 12 chapters really all fit together, and then the last 13 through 21 kind of fit together as well. And so we'll kind of bring, hopefully, everything together by the end of chapter 12 that we've looked at over the last previous 2 weeks as we dig in. So the big question that you want to keep in mind when you read these chapters is once again something that we've talked about previously, and it is, who is Jesus? That is the question of the hour. It is the question that has bounced around. Some people are open to answering that question. Other people have already made up their minds. We see that in this text. There are some who already know what they think about Jesus, and there's not really going to be much to change that. And as we dig in, we'll kind of see some of these different things unfold for us. But that word believe is going to be a big one. So quick flow portion, and then we'll get into some of the text. So chapter 9, you've got a man that was born blind that Jesus heals. And in kind of a unique situation, we actually get to find out what happens after this man is healed and kind of what he experiences as someone healed by Jesus. Then in chapter 10, we have a section where Jesus talks about who he is. Everybody has a lot of stuff to say about who Jesus is. In chapter 10, he tells us who he is. Chapter 11 is the very famous miracle of Lazarus being raised from the dead. And by the end of that chapter, we see very clearly that whatever Jesus does, there are going to be some who respond negatively. It doesn't matter what he does. Even raising a dead person is not going to change their view of Jesus. And then in chapter 12, we kind of have things all come together where he is anointed by Mary. He is taken into Jerusalem, essentially as kind of a king. And then much of the chapter is filled with the kind of, you need to believe in Jesus, and here's why some didn't, and here's what some should do. And so we'll kind of bring everything together there in chapter 12. But if you want to open up to chapter 9, just again, for time's sake, we won't read every verse of all of the chapters, but we will read portions of each one so we can discuss them. So let's read the first few verses of chapter 9. We'll read down through verse 7. Now, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It is not that this man sinned, or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Now, when you talk about Jesus' miracles, when you read through the Bible and you start talking about them, we use words like a typical miracle, which doesn't make any sense because miracles are obviously atypical. But this is a standard typical miracle for Jesus. We're not shocked when we read he made someone that was blind able to see. We see this on multiple occasions. But one of the things that we're given here that's a little bit unique is a little bit maybe of the cultural view of sickness and of disease and why these things happen. So based on what the disciples say, if they kind of are of the general mind of the average person in their culture, what's the answer for why is this guy born blind? He did something wrong, right? He must have sinned, or his parents must have sinned. This kind of thing is only coming by the result of somebody having done something to God, and this is punishment. Now, as we think about that idea, is sickness, is disease, is disability, is that accurate? Is their answer to this guy's situation, is that accurate? Go ahead, Mike. Right. That doesn't make it doesn't work, because if it was because of sin, well, then everybody would have some massive ailment because everybody has sinned. Or even if you've been perfect, what's the problem? Well, my parents weren't perfect, and their parents weren't perfect, and you go on and on down the line, right? And so if it's the result of that, we've all got problems. Now, ultimately, we know we all have problems because sin does exist, right? The whole reason we have these issues is because of sin, but it's not necessarily because of your individual sin, right? It's not you lied, God's going to, strike you with some kind of illness. Although if God chooses to do that, he is able to, but that's really not what we see here. Jesus basically says, no, that's not why this guy is blind. He's not blind because he did something horrible and God struck him, or his parents did something horrible and God struck him, right? Instead, Jesus says this is going to be something that's used for the glory of God. And so you can imagine then, if what they believe is generally speaking what people believe, you can imagine why you might be a little bit arrogant when you look at somebody else, right? Well, if they're struggling, well, clearly there's